Pretty cool, right? It's like your first time.
Yeah.
I was pretty excited.
Yeah.
What's up, everyone? We are
Hey.
back with the whole SAV crew. Why don't we do a quick round of introductions for those who haven't met some of our awesome hosts? When we start with Daphne.
Me, what should I share? Hi, I'm Daphne. I'm located in Los Angeles, California. I'm a physical therapist working in Pasadena, and I like really warm blankets. My favorite really warm, fuzzy blankets.
Okay, Jasmine.
Hi, everybody. I'm Jasmine. Actually have not hosted yet, although I have been on some episodes that you guys might have seen. Tampa, Florida. Recently just got a little kitty, and he's been, filling up our lives with joy. So kick it off, Norman.
Well, I'm Norman. I'm sure you've seen me around in other, streams and hosts. And I'm in Miami, Florida, and it looks like I'll be providing my male presence here.
Hey, we've got two male perspectives here,
I guess
I think Brian's not.
I'm still trying to figure out which side I'm on, but
wait, what?
Which game you playing for, dude?
It's fluid. It's fluid.
Gender binary. Non-binary. Anyways, my name is Brian.
That's another topic for a whole nother day.
Oh, Lord.
Whole nother topic, yes. But okay, we can get started. So this is a very interesting conversation, and I feel as though a lot of people or a lot of us talk about this within our private chats, and this is going to be exactly that. It's going to be like our private chat, but with everyone else in the audience. So this is about communicating specifically in relationships, and I'm just facilitating. I'm not the expert here. Jasmine and Daphne are fantastic at it. And we're gonna dig into their thoughts, and Norman and I are gonna, jump into their thoughts.
Right, okay, but side, the male perspective.
I would like to say, not claiming to be an expert, just with a lot of experience and whatever it is that in our lens that we can help facilitate better communication to other people, then take it with a grain of salt. By no means an expert, nor am I licensed.
I am licensed to be a physical therapist, not a communications expert or a, physical actual therapist. Yeah, but we just like to talk. So talking helps with communication.
Fair enough. Okay. Why don't we kick it off with a couple of questions? The audience, feel free to chime in, and then we'll go from there. So the very, very first question I have here is, a lot of people talk about how important communication is in a relationship, but what exactly is the definition? Like, how do you guys define good communication in a relationship? Like, what does that look like?
Mm-hmm.
I think communication is so broad that there's not just, one good definition. I think if I were to say, however, it is being able to share your thoughts, how you feel without judgment with whoever you're sharing it with, but also their comprehension of what you're sharing, right? There needs to be that give and take of sharing without judgment. And then also just the clarity in what you guys are communicating about.
I think communication, like coming off of what Jasmine said, is definitely it's a two-way street all the time. You have to be able to listen to what your partner also wants and also kind of articulate what you want in a way that's conducive to both of you. So it's almost like you're tackling an issue or a topic together, as in you're like on the same team and you're trying to figure out what's a good solution or what's a good way to move forward versus like you two against each other. Because I feel like in communication with like when it comes to like whether it's a subject or something that's really challenging is always like us versus them type of mentality, when it's in reality it should be like us versus the problem mentality.
Yeah, definitely. Like I think you guys both hit it on the head very well, and I think first and foremost for me, like I have to be honest with myself, right? I have to know what I want in order to be able to communicate what I want, and also be able to listen carefully to other person's thoughts as well too. So I think definitely got to be open and honest with everybody, and that's the first step in good communication. Many other steps.
Oh my gosh. the reflection of like knowing what you want is so important. You can't just like, I have a lot of feelings. I'm someone who feels a lot.
Yeah.
So my knee-jerk reaction is always like, oh my God, I just want to do this across. And like, wait, but what do I actually want out of this, right? Like, my partner always asks, like, what do you want? What are you asking? Like, what are you asking for? And what do you need? And I'm just like, that's a really good question.
And that's something that's, I think, from what you're saying, Daphne, has kind of surfaced more recently. At least I've seen in, going through my feed, and that sometimes when we communicate, whether it's to our partner or to our friends, there's a differentiation between, are you just venting? Are you asking for advice? What is the purpose? And I think also having level setting on that, what do you want out of this conversation is really important, because sometimes you just want people to listen, or sometimes you want feedback. And I think having both sides, or whoever involved, understanding of the purpose of that conversation is really good too.
Just to add on to what Jasmine was saying, because I really harp on that a lot, is asking the individual who you're communicating with, are you just venting, or do you actually want feedback? Just that idea alone, I think it underpins the importance of communication. You have to think about it, like, how do you intentionally communicate with certain things? Like for me, I know for many years, whenever someone says something to me, I'm like, well, why don't you do this? Or why don't you do that? And people get frustrated. But it wasn't right. But I think it's natural too. Like, we want to help people, we want to problem solve for them, but that's not always the case. And I think part of good communication for me, especially in the last few years, has been being aware that there are certain things that make communication better, like asking that question first. Do you want me to just listen, or do you actually want to hear feedback? And usually it's just they want to vent. So
and that's like really important too, because I'm a physical therapist, right? So like we have a job hazard where I just see people walk on the street and I'm just like, there's right, there's like, I had like knee pain, back pain, and like should I give them advice? And like recently I've been rock climbing, and so people have been like, I've been seeing people's scars on the wall. I'm like, oh my goodness. Some of them are fantastic. Some of them are just, could use some strengthening. And so like, it's kind of hard to not want to give unsolicited advice because you just want to help them, right? But at the same time, when it comes to communication, it's like, okay, like, what do you want? Do you want me to listen to you, like you guys are saying, or do you just want to vent, or do you actually want advice? Because I think if someone like would give me advice and ask, I'm just like, I didn't ask for that. It doesn't resolve anything.
Yeah, I think there's a couple of, I guess, bullets that each person can kind of go through before going into a conversation, right? Because I think a casual conversation where you're just saying, hey, hey, what's up, how you doing? That's easy. For most of us, it's easy. But when you go into the territory of like conflictual, topics, I think, again, level setting, being mindful of the space that you're holding personally to be able to receive the information that you're about to get, and then also being mindful of that person. What kind of space are they in currently? And then, like we had just shared, in terms of what is the purpose? What does that person want to get out of this? What are they looking for? I think just being mindful and being considerate of all of that across the board. I guess asking if they have that space to have that conversation right now sometimes is really important, because if there's a lot of things going on their plate, it's just an added stress that they can't process that information anyways, right? And so there's, I think there's a lot of things kind of check off the box to kind of prepare yourself for that conversation.
But why don't we actually jump into the next question? Because I think that note right there is a big reason why we wanted to have this live stream, which is like, I learned about normal check-ins from you guys. That was not a thing for me. And I think it goes to the whole thing Jasmine was just saying about conflict. So there's always going to be conflict in a relationship to some capacity. The question is, how do you initiate that conversation? And that's why I really like the idea of a normal check-in, because when I think about conflict, I think about texting someone, we need to talk.
Man.
But all the preparation before you even send that text, like,
like the freaking out. Okay, it's like, oh, do I want to send this?
Entering into a war kind of thing. Am I ready? Are you ready? Yeah,
it's the one
But
sentence you don't want to hear.
To you guys, how do you guys initiate that conversation? And can you talk more about the check-ins that you guys utilize?
Yeah.
I guess I'll jump in on this one. So to be fully transparent, I actually have never, done check-ins until my current relationship. I think it's in part that, mental health back in the day wasn't a big thing. It wasn't anything that any of us talked about. Also, we were really young, really didn't know. And still, even though we thought we knew everything, we were definitely still navigating through the terrains of relationships and knowing how to talk in them. So what I've recognized in doing a lot of reflection on myself and my life and in my relationship the past couple of years is that, for many of us, we are in the stage of building our careers, preparing for family life. So on a day-to-day basis, I would almost say that we're always on the go. And we personally don't have the mental capacity to even check in with ourselves to be like, hey, are we okay? Right. And so I think the first step for me was being mindful to check in with myself and asking myself, like, one, am I happy with my job, my career? Am I happy with how's my family? Am I happy with my relationship? And if there's any hiccups in there, then the purpose for me would be to bring that up to kind of to ground myself again. But then also asking that same questions about your partner. And it doesn't have to be your partner. It could also be about your family, your parents, brothers, sisters, siblings, friends. Their life is on the go too. And so you can also ask that with them. And I think, again, it all comes back to those bullets, recognizing, do you have the space right now to have that conversation? But then also asking the recipient, like, is this a good time for us to just talk? And it doesn't have to be something serious. I think initially, if it's not a habit that's already been created, it can be one of those, like, if I'm on the receiving end and someone's saying, do you have time to talk? I'll be like, what did I do? Like, what did I do? Right. And that's just reactionary, which brings me to another topic in that, another bullet point to kind of keep in mind is before coming into the conversation, are we jumping into it? Are we being reactionary? Are we taking the time and space for ourselves to evaluate it internally before we respond? And I think that me doing that for myself, changing the script from reacting to something to responding to something, has also allowed space for a more efficient and progressive conversation to where neither party is attacking each other. We're really trying to work together to solve that conflict or solve that problem. That was a lot all at once. So
yeah, I mean, I think coming from a guy perspective is like, whoa, it was like, why are you asking me if I'm okay? Of course I'm okay. Like, what is there to worry about, right? Because that's like my mindset. Like, when someone asks you, are you okay? Are you okay? How are you feeling? Yeah, I'm fine. There's nothing to worry about, But I think for me, it's more like, like not really thinking about myself. I'm just like, of course I'm okay. There's nothing to worry about. And like, but in reality, I'm kind of like, I'm kind of stressed. I'm working a lot, or like there's a lot of stuff going on in my mind, but I'm just not willing to, tell you that, oh, I'm kind of stressed. So I feel like there are something like instances where like a little bit of lubrication is needed to start that kind of, start that kind of, talk, right? So like, for instance, like, I saw this really good restaurant the other day. I think I want to try it out, and I've noticed that I've been cooking too much at home, and it's really causing a lot of stress. So like, that's a way to like kind of ease in the conversation of, I'm stressed. So like, let's go out to eat instead of cooking. I think that's a little bit of a, for me, how I approach checking in. Like, I use something to ease it in, and then talk about something that's more serious later on. And for me, that's how I would check in.
Yeah, I think that's really important, because a lot of the time, like when we talk about issues, it's like, oh, we need to talk. Like Brian, you were saying, it's always that text. So they're like, hey, can we talk for a second? And then you get this like visceral reaction, like, oh shit, what happened? And then like your heart rate goes up. uncomfortable. You feel like pulsing in your head, right? Or like that's what I feel. I think with relationship check-ins, like Jasmine was saying, I didn't really do this until my current relationship. It kind of stemmed from, I would say, just like a lack of communication overall in my last relationships, because we would only really talk about goals and expectations like in like a fairy tale sense of like, oh, like, we'll talk about the future and things like that. But nothing was ever concrete. And then when it got down to really the nitty gritty of like what it was like to really progress into future talk, it was actually a lot harder. It was also like not very healthy because I was stressed. My partners were also stressed, and like we hadn't established good communication. And there was like Jazz was saying, the whole aspect of like mental health, where that wasn't really spoken about. And especially in like Asian American culture in general, like you tell your parents, or if you tell anybody else that you're struggling with like mental health, it's usually something that people don't really want to take part in, or they're not comfortable in. And I think it's like a lot of therapy for me. I'm going to be honest. It's going to be a lot of like, when I went through my last breakup, it was very much of just like trying to figure out what I wanted and why that was important, and why that mattered. Because for me, I'm a type 2 on the Enneagram, which means that I'm the kind of person who loves to make other people happy as a way to like validate myself on like a bare minimum, right? And so I tend to lose myself on what people want. And when that happens, I feel very unfulfilled. And that leads to a whole cascade of like negative reactions. And so I think now knowing that and like being able to verbalize that, I'm able to actually start these things of like, okay, like Jasmine was saying, mindfulness, right? And stay tuned to normally, what am I doing? What do I need? And then what does my partner need in response to that, right? And so these like check-ins, I started with like kind of like a monthly thing, like, oh yeah, it's like our 1 month anniversary, let's talk about that. And like, what do you feel about us? Like, how are things going? And then from there, it just kind of kept going. And I think that's just like a very easy way to talk about it, like a little milestones that you guys talk about together, or like always start with like something positive usually. And like, I just want to talk about us. Like, it's been really fun this last month. Like, what do you think? That's a really good way to ease into it. And then from then on, like as you check in monthly, if things do start to pop up, you be like, hey, actually in the last like month, like I haven't been feeling like, my needs were met. Definitely talking about it from an I perspective too, and not being like, oh, like you're not doing this, as opposed to like, I feel like I need this, because it kind of relates it more to kind of like something about you rather than you accusing somebody else, right? And so that just takes like time and practice, and also mindfulness and your own reflection too. It's like life does get busy, like are you taking the time to even assess like what you need? Like, if you're stressed, like Norman was saying, you don't have the time to actually verbalize that you're stressed or realize that you're stressed, because you're just going, right? And so being able to take the time to like pause is really important, and it takes a lot of mindfulness and actual effort on our parts, because we're just so used to grinding. And grinding is always like what society tells us to do, is what we've been brought up with. And it's like, we need that time to actually stop grinding for a little bit, pause, and be like, what am I feeling right now? Why am I feeling this way? Maybe like doing a check-in with yourself first on like a monthly basis, or maybe like weekly. And then from there, you're going to be able to have a better time of like formulating the conversation that you want to have with your partner in future. So I think like usually in the honeymoon stage, you're like the first like 6 months, everything is like pretty and shiny and great, right? And so you're able to talk about good stuff, and that's how you kind of start that, like kind of decrease that visceral reaction of we need to talk, as in like, oh, like, we can gradually talk about our issues as time goes on. So that's kind of been like my perspective in the last couple of years.
I'd like to add to that. And I think one of the key things is practicing it, right? Because I think initially to even get into the habits is either one person or both people are going to have to be really mindful to initiate it monthly. I would even gauge to say that there's always going to be one person a little bit more mindful, but it's that person is going to be that catalyst that makes it habitual. But the more you practice, like the first time you do it, it's going to feel super uncomfortable. But it's what they say. It's the growth happens in that time that you are uncomfortable. Because if you're just cruising, then you're going to go 2-3 years on the road, and all of a sudden all hell breaks loose, and suddenly everything's wrong. And it all stems from that one problem that happened 2 years ago, but no one ever talked about it because it was swept under the rug. So I think it's important, in the beginning, and I say this from experience, in the beginning, I had to be mindful to remember that, oh, maybe it's been a month, maybe it's been a month and a half, and we really haven't talked about anything conflictual. I recognize that we're going. We don't really have time. My partner's schedule is pretty routine. We work, after work, we make time to exercise and go to the gym. And then when we get home, we, eat and whatever. And on the weekends, you guys all know, but Sundays is like non-negotiable meal prep. We just tackle everything in the kitchen. And unless there's like a dire need that needs to be met, then we'll put that to the wayside and, take care of it in other ways. But initially it's going to be, hey, almost as something that's like on the calendar. But what I've learned is the more that we've done it, the more that we're comfortable with it, and that visceral reaction actually starts to go away, because you are more accustomed, more used to the fact that, okay, your body's not expecting to be attacked. Your body is not expecting, and your mind and your body is not expecting to receive negative information. You're just receiving information, positive or negative. It's a little bit irrelevant, but you're just receiving that information and knowing that you have the support of your partner to work through it together, as opposed to sort of expecting like, what did I do to F this up this time? When really that's not the situation, right? And so where I'm at today with creating that habitual, sometimes it could just be random. Like we'll be in the car driving and something pops in my head that I recognize could be uncomfortable and conflictual, but I might just be like, hey, so I'm just thinking about this right now. Is this a good time to talk about it? And if not, we can table it for later. But at least it's, kind of prepared in both of our minds that this is something that we're going to come back to.
Mm.
Yeah.
That takes a lot of patience, honestly. It's like, I'm like, why are you attacking me? Why do you want to talk so much? Like it's like prying teeth with me. Like when you're trying to ask me questions of how's my day, like you have to like really like, I don't know. That's like so hard to like talk about that kind of stuff. So it's kind of like why do I need to talk about this?
But I think that's practice. The practice in that is both not just for you and your relationships, whether romantic or platonic. So I would even say in a romantic relationship with your partner, but also again with family and friends.
Mm-hmm.
It's the check-in is good for the relationship, but also good for yourself. You want the people that you love around you to also grow individually. And so whether it's a issue, problem, or anything that is related between the two of you, it could just be a check-in to remind them to be like, hey, have you thought about just slowing down and thinking about all the things that you've done and gone through and put your body through and your mind through this past month? Like, how does that make you feel? Like, what is it that you're missing? What maybe they're 90% happy for the month, but in that 10%, where is there room for you to just be a little bit more, to be a little bit happier, to feel a little bit more grounded, And so it's helping the people around you to be more confident, even, to be more confident in their body, in their thoughts, and everything else. And I think, again, doing that allows you to move away from the reactionary, the initial reaction that we're just so used to doing, and then taking the time to process all the information before we respond. And that's where we get more of the positive, effective, and progressive conversations that start with a conflict, but then you end up with a solution that is good for everybody.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
The only thing from the guy side I'll say is that many of the conversations I've had that started off like that, I, like Norman kind of hinted at there, would shut down.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, I really don't feel like my needs are met. I'm like, leave. But I'm being like, very honest here. I can almost guarantee you that a lot of guys feel like that. And I think one of the things that it takes is a realization of, this is what helped me, a realization of, if someone is reaching out to you and asking like, hey, can we work on this, or something's missing here, don't take it as like an insult or criticism necessarily. It's the people who don't talk to you at all is when they've given up. And that's what I usually look at it. If someone's reaching out to provide feedback, that's a good thing. They care about you.
Mhm.
If someone doesn't talk to you at all, they're done. They've quit. They moved on.
Mhm.
And so in my mind, when someone reaches out and says something like that to me, can we talk or something like that? I try not to think of it as a negative thing.
Yeah.
It's a positive thing, and they want it to be better.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that's like a product of what society has made us think. It's like you still have options. You can do this outside, right? You are able to, yes, it's true. You have options. You have always the option to leave. And if your needs are not being met, definitely reassess and like if you need to go, go. But at the same time, it's also like you're gonna have to be where relationships are hard. They're work, but it's also great. There's like good, there's always good and bad to both, right? But as long as you're netting positive, like, you know, 2 steps back and like 4 steps forward, it's still like this upward trend where like if as long as they're still willing to work with you, and I think as long as like there's love there, right? You know that like you guys are still for each other. It's just kind of developing those skills to communicate. And it's not easy. Like it takes, I'm like a year and a half into this relationship, and it's still like my knee-jerk reaction to ask for something that I need. I'm just like, oh, I don't want to do this. This is uncomfortable. And like Jazz, I don't know how long you and Nico, and same thing with you, Norma, with you and your partner. Like, how long has it been? You know, like this is a skill that needs to be practiced and exercised. And sometimes it gets easier, but it might not 100% get completely gone in terms of that knee-jerk reaction, right? And I think like the most important thing is that partners have to be ready on both ends to receive. And like the receiving part is also really hard because you have to be less selfish on your part. And like we're innately selfish people. Our brains are like preservation. That is our baseline. Like how do we survive? And survival, not just like, you know, in like a food basis, but survival is in like how do we keep like an emotional level so that our brains can establish that like physiological equilibrium, as in like there's no up and down of blood pressure, things like that. So from like a science perspective, that's what typically happens. And so because of that, we'll process things and then we tend to want to shove things aside because that's going to cause a lot more issues. But the more you actually shove that down, like, you know, you keep putting things under the rug, you're going to trip over it eventually. You know what I mean? And when you trip, you're going to fall flat on your face. And like, how bad is that trip? Right. And I think it's one of those like trying to be mindful is the most important thing. Like mindfulness is everything. Like being able to think about what you need on a consistent basis and how that relates to your partner, and involves processing on your part, and then you observing and getting to know your partner as who they are as they are, but not who they are to you, if that makes sense. Like we tend to like, I catch myself in these cycles sometimes where I'm just like, I need something from my partner, but it's like, wait, what does my partner need at this time, you know? And so it's finding that balance between both. And that's why like communication is so important, because at the same time, like, while you do get to know your partner, yes, you know their habits over time, and yes, you're gonna like get different things about them that you can kind of read, but then they're also not expected to read your mind. Neither are you expected to read their mind, right? You can tell certain things, but like over communication is what's key here. Like you can't just assume, you know. It's like,
yeah, you should never assume.
yeah, and it literally makes an ass of you and me. But
Yeah.
right?
I mean, yeah, I you know, want to just say that we're all humans and we're always evolving, and the circumstances around us are always going to change. And so when I say practice communication and making it into a habit, there is no end point. Like this is a lifelong thing. I mean, I make this correlation because it's just what I know best. But when you exercise, when you work out, you know, you can work out for a year and you build up the muscle and, you know, the body configuration that you like. But if you stop for the next 6 months, you're not going to maintain what you had. You know, you have to keep going. And why is that important in communication is because as we get older, as our lives change and it shifts, whether it's career change, whether it's, you know, having kids, gaining families, it's never going to be the same as this moment later, right? And so practicing that communication is really important to stay in touch with each other. But again, I think it's really important to remember that you're also helping yourself and the other individual, you know, be strong within themselves too, like mindfully because if you're not in that space and you're constantly just going and forgetting about yourself, you're also going to forget about your partner and your relationships. And the longer that goes, it's just so much harder to go back and try to figure out the root problem. Not that it can't be done, you know. I mean, Nico and I have been together for 4.5 years, right? And there still are some topics sometimes where, in all transparency, it will take me a few days, maybe even like a week or so, to ponder it to myself. I give myself grace. Like, I'm not gonna just let it live in myself and let it ruin me for that, the whole time that I'm not sharing it. But I prefer to go through mindfully myself of how this makes me feel, how this possibly could make him feel, before bringing it up. Again, really being mindful to respond to what's going on, as opposed to being like, well, why didn't you think of me? Or, why did you do that? Or why didn't you do that? You didn't make space for me. Because that, when you go into that space, it's so much harder to have the conversation that you want, and to kind of make any progress.
Yeah. Like, I just want to point out, like, sometimes, like, men have, like, different communication style, right? Like, we might not want to talk about it, but we might do something that, hey, I'm in need, or I'm doing something that I noticed for you that's creating stress. So, like, I will, like, I'll kind of say, like, oh, can you get me this item from across the room? It's like me saying, oh, I don't have time to do it myself, but can you do it for me? It's like, I'm not, saying that I'm stressed. I'm telling you that I am stressed by saying that, can you get this for me? Or, like, for me, I can see that you're stressed, and you need help. So instead of me asking you that, oh, are you okay? I'll be like, you know what? Let me go pick this up on the floor real quick for you. Or let me get you a blanket or something, or let me get you some water, or let me get you some kind of, like, let me cook some food. That would be my way of telling you that I noticed something's wrong up with you. But instead of me asking you, hey, what's up? What's going on? I might just kind of, like, just do something for you, So I just kind of have to be mindful of the communication between the difference between men and women. So women tend to say something out loud real quick. The men, or me in general, like, I'm like, I'm not gonna talk about it, but just do something about it.
I mean, yeah. Sorry, Jasmine.
No. What were you gonna say, Daphne?
No, I'm just saying it's like the love language too, right? So it's like your love language for showing someone that you care is like you're giving things to them, you're doing things for them. And like these acts of service are amazing because that's how you show that you care for somebody, right? And then at the same time, your partner's like love language might be like, communication, talking, quality time, things like that. So it's like people's also keeping my heels receiving love language might be different from their giving love language too, right? So you kind of have to like figure out what's that with your partner. But again, that just involves communication. And like, as hard as it is, sometimes like verbally just saying it is very much better than like trying to just show. Because showing sometimes, like if I were to receive something, it's like, I don't need that. I need you to like be there with me unless I know that that's your love language. And then I can start to appreciate that more.
Yeah, it takes a lot of confidence to actually just open your mouth, like
it does.
It's a lot of confidence.
I mean, to piggyback off that, I would say you also have to do the work to know your partner. Like for those who have not taken the love language test, even if you aren't in a relationship, it's really important because that's the same for your other relationships in terms of how you feel loved, how you give, and understanding your partner and how they feel it is really important because you could be two completely different people. And even if you are alike, like there's very minute differences that in talking with each other you better understand. So you might understand things one way, but maybe they need for you to be a little bit more blunt, or maybe they need for you to take that extra step to do things in a way that they find is loving and caring. So I mean,
it can be frustrating. It can be frustrating.
It is, but relationships aren't easy. It really isn't. Just because same with a job, just because you got a job, just because you got a relationship doesn't mean you can just, sit back and cruise. Like you have to do the work. And your environment, your circumstances, everything around your life and their life is constantly changing and evolving. So you have to keep doing the work to keep, up to pace with that. You can't just sit back and chill. And I wanted to go back to what Brian said before in terms of like, if you don't like it, leave. It's not I will say it's not just a male, mentality. Like I've been in that situation where I'm like, look, I'm working on my life. I'm working on my career. If you're really not happy, then leave. But I think if we take a step back and think about it, who's really talking there? I want to say that it's more our ego, our fear of being vulnerable, our fear of, really pulling back that layer. And what if we get hurt? What if they really do leave, But in all of this, you have to be okay and be accepting to really be true to who you are if you want more out of a relationship. What you put in is what you're going to get out, right? Like that's true for so many things.
I have a question for you guys. So you know how people always say that when you meet the right one or when you meet the person that you're supposed to be with, it's supposed to be easy. Like, oh, you shouldn't have to work so hard, or oh, it should be easy. Like what do you guys think about that?
I think there's caveat to that. Like it is, but it isn't.
Yeah.
Sounds good. I don't know if it's necessarily true all the time. Like, yeah, I think it should be easy, but it's hard to tell also in the beginning. Like it's honeymoon phase. A lot of things do feel easy. I personally think it could go either way. I think it's just a nice thing to say.
I would almost even say, again, going back to the work, it could be easy, but if both people are doing the work, you're putting in effort, but now you're not the only one putting effort, or they're not the only one putting effort. You get what I'm saying? Like it requires work, but it's, it's easy in that sense. It's not the easy where you just sit back and chill and everything just flows, right? But if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
Like I think it's easy when like both parties are like willing to be open and communicate, and like they know how to read each other. Like if they are, in their minds and they know how to communicate, then it's gonna be easy. But it's gonna be hard if one person knows how to communicate, but the other person doesn't know how to communicate. It's like you're gonna be prying that mouth open, with a claw, So it's gonna be hard. It's gonna be hard. It's gonna be hard. I'm just trying to use simple, analogies here.
That's very visual one.
I feel like there's actually there's a book title that's like "Women Are Crowbars and Men Are Clams."
Yeah.
Like you guys heard that title?
I agree.
That sounds scary.
Can I retract my statement I just made at first? I want to say that I disagree with the comment because I really like the variable that Jasmine pointed out. So after being in a relationship for 10 years, I can tell you that the number one reason why it failed is work. Yeah, it could be easy. You can be the best compatible person ever, but you have to both parties have to put in work. So saying it's easy is a facade. You always have to put in work, especially after 10 years. Don't think about it's easy. Know that it's gonna get hard and you have to put in work.
I think it's also like, what do you mean by easy? What does easy mean? Does easy mean like Lauren was saying, communicating well? That's definitely easy because then you can get through problems. Or does easy to you mean like, oh, there shouldn't be any conflict whatsoever. You should all be cruising, right? Yeah. And so I feel like a lot of the time when people say that's easy, to me, when I hear that, it's like, oh, I shouldn't be like having this much conflict with this person, or oh, like we shouldn't be like talking about these challenging things because you should just know. Right. That's like the misconception of the word easy, because like my parents have been together for 30 plus years. Like it's work, but it's not necessarily like easy in that sense, because they've done a lot of hard work to get to where they are. But being with someone for 30 years, like you guys said before, all you can count on is change. That is the one thing, kind of things will always be changing. And so to say that things will always be easy is kind of a fallacy in itself. But what does easy mean? Right. And I think when we say easy, it's like, we should focus less on the situational easy, as in like, when I hear easy, people always tell me like, oh, you shouldn't be like having this much conflict. You shouldn't have to like debate so much. You shouldn't have to do this with your partner. And I'm like, but then how do you grow? Like how do you get? I talk a lot, clearly, and it's like I love to hear and talk about people's experience, but it's also like people don't want to share that. It's hard for me to get to know them either as well. So when it says easy, for me, that's like, it's so easy to communicate with someone,
Mhm.
and
Exactly.
the reaction that you get is something that is life-giving as opposed to life-draining, right?
Yeah.
If like you were to try to communicate what you needed
Yeah.
and your partner was just straight up like, no, that's not right. Or like, oh, what if they were to do something to you where not do something, like the way they would communicate is like they don't understand what you need. And so they would try to do something, but at the same time, you're not
Yeah.
being heard. Like that's
Yeah.
hard. That's not easy. Right. And I think it's like you can work towards that communication always. It's always something you can, like Jasmine and Norman and Brian were all saying this. You can always work on it, but it's like you have to be willing to work on it and realizing that like easy doesn't necessarily mean situational. Like, you know, we're just gonna cruise and nothing wrong will ever happen because
Mhm.
that's false. Like
Exactly.
know that we all go through difficulties, right? And so to say that that won't happen in your relationship, that's something you kind of have
Assign to
to,
yourself.
yeah, we have to redefine it. Like, what does easy actually mean?
Mhm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I would say an example of easy would be having the confidence to know that your partner will support you
Mhm.
in how you feel,
Mhm.
and knowing that whatever it is that, you know, even if there's initial disagreement, that you won't ultimately go through that conflict alone, right? That's an example of easy. Knowing that if you were to be vulnerable and share something, share how you feel, that you won't be left feeling like you're the only person in your corner.
Mhm.
You know, it could be a tremendous life conflict that you're going through, and maybe your partner doesn't agree with it, but will they still put in the effort and the work to support you so that you can, and when I say support, it's, you know, not like money support or anything like that, but just support you to get past what it is that you're going through. And how can you, and knowing that coming out of that, you both will grow, you know, both together and also individually.
Mhm.
And when you look at that as a whole, it's not easy. You know,
Easy.
it's really difficult. Again, it really allows, it really requires both, or all, whoever is involved, to be vulnerable and to be receptive. Um, so, you know, for me, that's easy. Knowing that no matter what it is, I can go to my partner and we'll find a way to, you know, come out of it better. That's easy,
Mhm.
right?
To move on to a concrete question here, that I think this is what led to another big conversation within our own internal group, is about bringing up certain topics to our partners. So the question here is, can you share an example of a time when you need to bring up an unpleasant topic, like your partner is doing something that is bothering you? How did you do it without coming off accusatory? So the reason why I think this is very interesting, and from a guy perspective, is like most oftentimes women are very caring in general. Guys are not. I don't know. We just don't think about certain things. But here's the thing. Maybe they. I'm not obviously not saying that's the norm. Just saying majority of people, right? So not everyone. But I can say from my personal experience, when I hear those kind of statements from my uh, women friends, they usually are surprised and sometimes mad when a guy doesn't do something for them. When in the guy side, it's like, if I knew, I would do it. But for whatever reason, we process things a little differently and we don't think about it. So I think it's an interesting thing. So the question is going back to that. Think about a time how you shared something and, you know, how did you do so?
Do you have an example in mind, Daphne?
I do. It's just like it's a very like you know
Oh,
saucy.
you go ahead. You go.
I think it's just like the littlest things in the list. So in the beginning, like you know, when you're first together with somebody, like it's like you communicate all the time. You're texting all the time, and like you're like you know saying good morning and good night, and like you're FaceTiming a lot. And I think a lot of that for me, I love that. I love talking. I love talking to my partner. But I think it's also like so that started to die off a little bit. And so when I realized that, I'm like, hey, like, you know what happened, right? Because I'm somebody who this is still uncomfortable for me to do that, but I would rather just like blurt it than have to like contain it. Because one, like, that's hard for me to contain things all the time and like act like nothing's wrong, and like that actually does bother me, you know. So when I just like little things like that. And how we resolved it was just like, it's always a me statement, always like, hey, like I miss this, you know, I miss when we used to do this. And it's never like accusatory. It's always like, or trying your best to not be. So it's instead of like, you can rephrase it in different ways. Instead of like, the negative way would be like, oh, like, why don't you do this anymore? Versus like, oh, like, I miss you doing this in the past. Like, it really meant a lot to me. Like, you know, like, can we keep doing it? Or like, you know, what happened? And so that kind of opens a more positive conversation. Like phrasing is everything, right? And actually taking the time to like think about it and how it comes across is work for me, because I tend to knee jerk a lot. And so my knee jerk reaction was like, what's wrong? Like, what happened? Like, what did you do? You know? Whereas like for me to take a step back, it's hard because I don't like to do that. It's also because like it's difficult for me to want to process through my feelings and sit there in my discomfort, where I just want to like blurt it out and let it go. But that's not always the best thing either. So it's also kind of like rephrasing is super important, and just seeing if your partner were to tell you that the way you would want to say it, how would they receive it? Right. Just little.
Yeah, I don't have a specific example to share. Although I will say that a couple of things I take myself through when there is something that needs to be brought up. I always try to just take the situation from a neutral perspective, and then my perspective, and then also putting myself in the other person's shoes. I see you guys are laughing because I'm trying to read this chat here. But also, I want to share something that I think could be really beneficial to people in relationships. You know, we often refer to the honeymoon phase as like the best time. Like there's no problems, sun is shining, great, right? But I think it's really important that a couple of things, but the top ones for me would be to continue to give your partner the benefit of the doubt. And that goes in with trust, right? So for an example on that would be when you guys are first dating, if your partner is late for a date that you planned, you're not going to automatically think like, oh, this guy don't care about me, or this girl she just whatever, like they're just off doing and they don't care, they just wasting my time. And you automatically get upset because you're sitting there waiting. I think initially when you're first dating, you might think the first reaction if someone is coming later, you haven't heard from them, is worry. Are they okay? Like maybe, you know, did something happen to them on the way here? Are they stuck at work? You know, you worry first before you accuse them of actually doing something intentional to hurt you. I think if you put yourself in the mindset to constantly give your partner the benefit of the doubt first, it takes you out of your own head thinking all of these possible scenarios that they intentionally did to hurt you. Whereas, I don't know, maybe they got into a car accident on the way to the date and now they're late or they're in the hospital. And how shitty do you feel sitting here thinking that they just forgot about you, right? Another thing is consistency. I think it's really important. And I know that we've had conversations internally with SAV about, you know, when you first get into a relationship, you do all these things that you don't normally do. And then all of a sudden it falls to the wayside. Really important to just, you know, for those who are getting into a new relationship or, you know, whatever, it's really important to be the person that you are, because that consistency is going to allow longevity into your relationship. So you're not doing things that are outside of your boundaries. You're not doing things that are, you know, require you to overexert yourself all the time. You know, maybe save those for special occasions, but that consistency that you give in, and that consistency should be expected from your partner as well.
Just to address Kevin's question and going back to consistency. So I leave the seat down after I use it, because it's not just for my significant other, it's for other guests that come to visit too. So, you know, it's important to be consistent. Now, if I left it up all the time, then I should leave it up all the time too. But, you know, that's not the case here.
I would, you know, like I would say to leave it the way you found it. I would say to leave. I mean, because if I'm not looking where I'm sitting and I fall in, like, I'm sorry. That's just my own damn fault. Like, I'm not gonna yell at Nico and be like, why didn't you leave the seat down? I fell in. Well, he's gonna be like, why didn't you look at where you're sitting? I would say just leave things the way you found it, or leave it better. I don't know.
Or to keep it, even more, clean, just sit down and pee. Instead of standing up and peeing, just sit down.
This is
I mean, that's a smarter way instead of always have to lift up the seat.
Give your
You
legs
do
a
that?
rest.
Is this personal experience?
This is how I would do it. This is how I,
Do you do that
relieve
currently?
myself. Currently. Yeah. Yeah. Why stand up and create a mess all over the toilet bowl? Because as a guy, your aim is horrible, right? So in my mind, I'm like, I don't want to be cleaning this mess all the time.
Aim. You can.
No, Brian, come on. It's the morning, and you're trying to.
I'm trying to wrap my head around this sitting down thing.
Yeah, you sit down to pee to create less mess. So I mean,
We appreciate
that way you don't have to always lift it up and have your partner fall in. If it's always down, then there's no issues, and it's always gonna be cleaner, create less mess. And I think it's a good solution to this kind of issue that happens all the time. Be a little bit less, ego. Put the ego away. So that I'm a man. I have to pee standing up. Put that away. Put it aside.
I'm going to default to the rule of thumb for this situation, but also in life, just leave things the way you found it.
Yeah.
I mean, we all have different, ways of solving this.
Would you sit in a public restroom, Norman?
Yes, I would. Just put some toilet paper on it and just put it down.
It's a sanitary.
Okay.
Honestly,
You gotta go.
When it comes to cleaning, honestly, we really appreciate when there's nothing we have to clean that's not gross. So it's like when it comes to cleaning the toilet, like please, yes, respect your guests, respect their houses, right? But in terms of nonverbal communication, with like Kevin was saying in the chat, the importance of nonverbal is important because you should be able to somewhat read your partner. But I think like when you don't verbally communicate, it also leaves room for misinterpretation, because like that could be like almost like projecting what you want into somebody else's reaction, when in reality it just is what it is, right? So like, for example, if like someone were to sit next to me like all quiet and be like, I'm like, hey, what's wrong? Like nothing. And then for me, like if I were to do that to somebody else, that means for me something is wrong, which is like not right either. I can't be projecting what I want or what I need onto somebody else, or how I would react to their situation, right? So I think it's like nonverbal is important because you at least get to know like a gist, but I think it's good to over communicate as much as you can, because that way no assumptions can be made. But yeah, I don't know.
Which
before that,
which gets taken care of. Those nonverbal communications can be clarified in your check-ins.
Exactly.
But I want to clarify that in public, I don't really care about the mess, so I'll use urinal. So I don't care about other people. I want. It's for my house.
So interesting. This is a very fascinating conversation.
Hey, you gotta think ahead of time.
Look, there is some truth. I don't know if you guys seen that meme where there's like this guy in bed with his partner and he's like on his phone and she's just like, what's wrong? But he's just here thinking about like, he's just here thinking about like what might have been wrong with his car on the way home, and he's researching it. There's some truth into that. It's funny I say that because Miko one time was just like he had his back turned to me and he was on his phone, and you know how you can kind of sense your partner, like maybe something's off. And I look over and he's just like deep into researching about some part about his Subi, and he's just like worried. And, if you let your mind run wild, it will run wild. So I would say, defer to just be blunt and ask your partner versus living out your wildest dreams, which is all just assumptions.
Yeah. We only have like 5 minutes left. So let's wrap up with a question.
I want to tell my story real quick. Let me tell my story, man. So, look. So, like my partner, she is very, singular focused, right? And she wanted something, and she wants it now, right? And so, awesome. Over the weekend, last week we were in California, and she wanted ice cream. So I was like, okay, put the address in. Let's go get some ice cream. And this ice cream is 40 minutes away. I'm like, 40 minutes away for ice cream? Like, what?
Some good ice cream, man.
yeah, this is like lunchtime. Like I'm getting kind of hungry, you know, like I want lunch, like I want real food, not ice cream. So I'm like, but I'm like, okay, you know, I want you to have what you want. So I'm gonna drive 40 minutes to get the ice cream, right? And then she gets the ice cream, she loves it. I'm getting kind of hangry. So I'm still not, you know, complaining yet, but I'm getting there. And she's like, oh, let's go have lunch in San Francisco. Let's drive another 40 minutes all the way to get food, right? I'm like, I haven't told her yet that I'm hungry. You know, I haven't told her yet I'm hungry. This is like 2 o'clock already. Like by the time we get to San Francisco, it's like 3:30, 3 o'clock. I'm like, oh my. I want to say this plan is crazy, right? This is crazy. This is not gonna work. This is a bad idea. But and then drive another 20 minutes back home after eating dinner, 40 minutes away, and drive another 20 minutes back home to our apartment. Instead of saying this idea is crazy, I was like, hey, I'm kind of hungry. I don't think it's a smart idea to drive 40 minutes to get lunch. Why not just find something, you know, close by, you know, like, you know, to eat? But in her mind, like the plan was, let's eat in San Francisco because that's where the good food is, right? And that's her focus. She follow the plan, you know, do A, do B, do C. And I was like, this in my mind, like, this is crazy. This is not good. I don't want to do this. But I didn't want to say that. But so I told her, hey, I'm getting kind of hangry. I'm hungry. Can we just not do the plan and just kind of get something to eat fast? And then she's thinking about, no. Let's go to San Francisco. But then she started thinking about it. Yeah, I think she remembers that I haven't eaten all day. So she's like, oh, okay, you're hangry. Okay, gotcha.
What? Question: was ice cream in the original plan? Because if it was not,
Yeah,
now
it was the original plan. It was the plan.
okay.
So I was like, oh man, this is the plan. But I didn't know where because the original location was closed. So we have to go to another location that's further away. So
Next time, pack a snack or something. I don't know.
I didn't know that we were driving so long. You know, it was
I know.
a hard drive. So even though I knew lunch plan was gonna be like, you know, in 40 minutes, like in San Francisco, but the plans kind of changed, and I didn't say, you know, I was hungry, but eventually I told her, hey, I'm hungry. Let's eat faster.
I like Kevin's use of words there, where you could have been like, would you be against, you know, I'm hungry, I haven't eaten yet. Would you be against going to an ice cream place that's closer? But let's go on to the last question here with the last few remaining minutes. The question is, do you ever go to bed angry at each other, and is it appropriate to? So I want to quickly start off with something that I do, is that I think it's fine to be angry by the end of the night, but I do think it's really important to acknowledge that you want to work on it. So usually if I am angry at someone, going to bed, it's like, you know, I know we're both struggling through this right now. We have this conflict. I want you to know that we're going to work it out. But right now, my emotions are not there right now. Let's talk about it tomorrow. But then we'll save it for the next day. But let's go on and you guys chat on that, comment on it.
Yes, that is a great way of going about it. I think there's no need to, it's good to remember that there's no need to rush into a resolution, right? Like some people want something fixed right away. Other people need time. I think, you know, if you're in a relationship and you really care and you really love for your partner, it's okay. And it's perfectly fine for you to put your ego aside and say, and say exactly what Brian said is like, look, this is going to need a little bit more time from us. And of course, we have responsibilities and priorities like work that we have to tend to. And I want you to get good rest. I need to get good rest. Let's continue this later. You know that I love you. We'll work through it. But you don't have to rush, because when you rush through a conflict, you could, you know, a lot of it is reactionary. You could end up saying things you don't mean. You could end up, you know, the feelings that you feel right now, for some people, they just need to sit in it. They just, you know, again, going back to checking in with, are you in the space to go through this conflict right now, to resolve it, or are you not? Because if you're going to, you know, if that person isn't in the right state of mind, you're both going to more or less be wasting your time and wasting your energy and possibly making the situation worse.
Yeah. I think the most common people hear about this is that never go to sleep angry. And I think it's better to, you know, calm down, think about it, because usually people want to win. Like for a guy, like I want to win this argument. I don't want to win, and I think when you think about that, you kind of lose the purpose of the whole entire argument itself. So like, I think it's definitely smarter to just sleep on it, even though you're angry or whatever. Just let your ego aside. And just, what, this is not that important. Let me just sleep first, and then be more mindful. Like this whole conversation is about being mindful, right? Being able to think about what you're saying first, not just be reactionary, as you guys say. But I think we're a very emotional group of people. Like humans are very emotional. So like, and we have a lot of pride in ourselves, and we want to win. So the first reaction is to let's end this now. Let's not go to I think that's why people do that. But I think it's definitely better to go to this other side of let's think about it first, and let's just calm down, and then think about why we're actually arguing, and then try to solve that issue before.
Yeah. To piggyback off of you guys, I am that person who is like, I hate sitting in this discomfort. I need to like resolve things like right here, right now, right? But then I remember this one time I was so emotional and so angry that like nothing productive was coming to my head, and all I wanted to do was like lash out. And then it took a lot in me to kind of like retract a little bit. It was like, okay, what you want to do and what you're saying right now is not productive. And so I would have to say like, look, I am very angry right now, and I don't know what else to tell you, and I don't know like what to say. I can't verbalize it, and I need to go to sleep. I have to work tomorrow at 6:45 a.m. right? And so when things like that happen, like it's to be okay with taking a pause for me is so hard. But I think it's just like that constant practice of knowing, like, Jasmine was saying, I love you, we'll still work through this, right? And that's the one thing that like is really hard. Kevin, the toilet compass.
To clarify, Brian is laughing at something Kevin said in the chat, not at Daphne.
Yeah.
So that was a practice of communication.
Stay professional.
But that's the thing, right? And I think it's that mentality, like we have to solve this now. Like, soft landings. Yes, soft landings on everything, to be honest with you. In terms of this as well, like soft landings on like how you want to, at least like how to pause the conversation in a way that's productive also, not just be like, you know what, F this, I'm done, I can't do this, I'm going to sleep right now, bye. And then that's not a good way either, right?
Yeah.
And if you can't, you want to put like a bookmark in it, like Jasmine was saying, like the thing that like impacted me most of the partner was like, like, I love you, let's remember that we're going from the same goal here, and we'll talk about it later. And that was like, it was a good enough end for me to be like, okay, like I can go to sleep, whereas instead of like just like fuming in my bed, all night.
Yeah. I think definitely.
Go ahead, Norman.
I think definitely, like, saying let's table this for now doesn't mean next day we're ignoring it. There's no problem. That's not the way to do it, right? That's not what I'm saying. Like you got to wake up the next day to have that kind of talk again while you're all calm.
I would say that, look, there is no right answer for any two people, any one person. Like, we're all different, right? But I think what I always come back to is creating these healthy habits in communication, not just for your relationships, but for yourself, right? Maybe initially when you are working through it with your partner, and that first big fight where before you go to bed and one person has to resolve and the other person's like, look, I got a big project in the morning, I really need some sleep, can we push this out to tomorrow? There's still that conflict. But maybe 5 conflicts down the road and you're working through it, right? You're getting to a better place to where there you can find a middle ground. So what Johnny says in the chat is he believes the best to resolve the issue before bed, not allow others to think throughout the night about the issue. Yes, but it also depends on the person. You could have 2 people who are like, yeah, I got shit to do in the morning, so I agree with you. But then, I used to be that person who wanted to back in college, wanted to resolve it. I couldn't think, I couldn't do anything, like Daphne said. I just couldn't function, and I wanted to resolve it. But doing the work to ground yourself individually, again, checking in with yourself, having a partner that encourages self check-ins, but also check-ins together, builds that confidence to where if you have a conflict 11 p.m., midnight before bed, you are confident that your partner is not just going to walk off in the middle of the night and be like, F you, I'm done. If you're not happy, leave. right? You know that you're going to come back to that conflict and work through it together. But for the sake of time, priority, etc. I mean, think about when you're starting a family, you throw in kids. What if you're in a conflict and your child is like throwing up? Are you gonna be like, I need to solve this now before I clean up, before I like attend to my child, while your child's choking and and all those things, right? You have to be mindful of the priorities and of also not just your physical health and your mental health, but also your partner's physical and mental health. And be in the mindset to be okay with saying, okay, look, I understand that I want to resolve something, but it's not in my partner's best interest to be staying up all night trying to solve this when he's got something to do in the morning that could jeopardize his job. It could jeopardize our future. It's this trickle event. Like you have to be able to think, in the best interest of other people and also yourself, and then find that common ground. My common ground between Nico and I are not going to be the same, Daphne, for you and Robert, and Norman for you and Susan. So when you constantly are communicating and working towards creating a better communication style that works for you as a couple, I think that will lend itself to just a healthier relationship, because there is no right or wrong answer, but you have to be mindful of your mental and physical health and also your partners.
Let me give the guys a tip, because there's no right or wrong
Just
answer,
a tip?
Right? Well, here's the tip. If as a guy, you're mad, you want to, maybe your partner wants to resolve it right now, something like that. Let them know that you're gonna resolve it tomorrow, and then lift up the seat the next day. That's nonverbal communication. Let them know that you're angry. Anyways, the reason why I bring this up, by the way, the whole idea of like being angry and stuff is something I learned during residency. We spent a lot of time coaching because there's a lot of conflicts in the hospital, and there's a concept that they taught us called mental hijacking. So when you're in a very heated emotion, yes, you can continue going, but just like what Jasmine was saying, the stuff you might say, sometimes you can't take back, and you can really damage some relationships. And I'll give you an example. I remember driving to the airport with one of my partners. I have never been so explosive in the car, and neither has she, ever. And I remember in my mind saying to myself, stop, you're making it worse. And it's just escalating. I never raised my voice, but we were both yelling at each other. And I remember I was like, this is not productive. So we got out of the car, we stopped, I pulled her out, and I gave her a hug, and I said, I'm sorry. This is probably just not the right time to talk. Let's just work on this later. But I remember being so emotional. We were both very emotional at that point, but I think we both respected it. So I think just going back to the right and wrong, some people maybe can resolve it right now, but some people can't. And I'm definitely in the latter where I need some time because I do get mentally hijacked. But let's do a roundtable and we'll kind of wrap up the live stream.
I just want to say one last thing, piggybacking off that, Brian, is, depending on, I want to say there's always going to be someone who feels just a little bit more over the edge than the other person, right? And if you're a person in that conflict that has the space to put aside your ego and be like, look, this person needs my partner needs a little bit more support. Like if you recognize that your partner is not yet in the space to where they can step away, let it settle, and take the night, if you can put aside your ego and do what exactly Brian did in his situation, which I feel like, Brian, that's commendable. And it's really hard to silence your ego. It's very, very hard, especially if, not that there's one person right or wrong, but especially if you feel that you are in the right. It's really hard to put that aside. But if you can be mindful of silencing your ego for the betterment of your relationship and for your partner, like that, that can work like wonders.
It might decrease the amount of divorces in this country,
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of this in practice can help with more healthy relationships.
Yeah,
And to
definitely.
what Johnny said, yeah, you know, I fully understand your child's need is a priority, but if you're in a relationship where you don't have a child, you have priorities outside of your relationships too. And working together to understand that for each other is really important.
Mhm.
So,
Yeah.
okay. Sorry, Brian.
No, good. Round table. Any last minute comments and thoughts from folks?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is good, like, but gotta be mindful that not everyone has the mindfulness to know all this stuff. So hopefully,
Right.
kind of grow as a person, not just be stuck in your ways,
Yeah. I think it's like giving yourself grace and giving your partner grace. Those are the two main things. It's like, remember that you guys are both human. Y'all both have feelings, whether or not that like they communicate it or they don't know. It depends on each person, right? And so mindfulness and allowing yourself to sit in your feelings is okay. It is okay. And like, don't be afraid of those feelings and allow yourself to really feel them first, because then you're going to be able to know what you need, right?
Yeah.
Because we're just so afraid of feeling because we're
Yeah.
not taught to. The more you feel,
Feelings is if,
the better you might not feel, but at least you know how you feel, if that makes sense.
feelings is not a manly quality. Just saying. No.
Let's change that narrative.
No, I know. Yeah.
Like, I think
Definitely
it's awkward to hear the advice of practice communication, because like practice talking, you know, how do you, it just, talking is talking, communicating is communicating, but it's, if you sit back and think about it, it is really, really important for you to practice how to communicate with your partner in a way that they can receive it best, and in a way that is progressive, so that, you know, the practicing, make it a habit to do a check-in, and initially it's going to be something that you might have to put on the calendar, that you both hold yourself accountable to, and eventually, in my specific experience, it has become something to where if something comes up, I can just, even if it has a little bit of, you know, that knee-jerk reaction, that visceral feeling, it goes away faster than it did when, you know, we first initially started. Make that a habit, and keep that habit through the longevity of your relationship. A couple of things I want to just, you know, put a marker on again is continue to always give your partner the benefit of the doubt. Don't think that they're after you or they're attacking you. You know, at the core of it, they're with you because they care for you, because they love for you. So don't assume the worst. Also, don't make assumptions about things that they do. You know, how they go about things can be entirely different than how you do it. How they receive things, how they approach things can be entirely different. So taking yourself out of your own shoes and both putting yourself in a neutral perspective where you're a third party looking at it from the outside in, but also from their shoes, is really important. And all of those things requires you to not react in the situation. So take yourself away, go for a walk, put your phone away, you know, just allow yourself to just live and reflect on what you're feeling, what's going on before you talk about it. Like reevaluate all of that. And I think it's all going to be hard, but you know, at the end, I think it's going to be better than perhaps what you've experienced before.
All right, guys. I think we're gonna wrap it up here. There's so many nuggets and gems in here. Not in my mind, as a mathematical guy, I think the one takeaway for me as we wrap up to this is after this live stream is over, will the percentage of men sitting down be higher or lower? I think it's gonna be higher. But anyways,
Put it on the poll. Put it on the poll.
Big
Just
shout
a
out
tip.
to Kevin and Johnny. This is just
I appreciate you guys with your comments.
Yes.
big shout
Thank
out
you,
to
guys.
Kevin and Johnny. Yeah, you guys are awesome. Thanks for
Johnny.
engaging. Big shout out to Daphne, Jasmine, and Norman for coming on and sharing these discussions. These are conversations we have inside our internal chats all the time. So if you guys like them, let us know. Maybe we'll have to do some more.
And more spicier.
Last but not least, you guys will see a lot that happens behind the scenes, but big shout out to Brian, who jumped off of a live stream right before this. This guy is working countlessly to keep this going, and couldn't do it without him. And that's why we were late, because he has other priorities and we understand. Thank you, Brian, for making all this happen.
Yes. Thanks,
Thanks.
Brian.
Thanks
You're
to
the
everybody.
best.
Thanks, Brian. Thanks,
Thank you,
everybody.
guys. All right, guys. Well, happy Saturday.
Yep.
Happy New Year's.
Happy New
See y'all
Year.
next time.
Years.
Catch y'all next
Bye.
time.
Bye.
See
Thanks,
ya.
guys.